It says it's recording. Okay.
Very good.
Dr. Brad, it's so good to see you. I
I
refreshed
have
up.
cleaned your cup.
And this is a rare for a weekend, but I shaved before I got on the video with you this morning for once. You know,
Wow.
the showering is one thing, but the shaving, that's a completely different issue.
That's quite a level of sophistication.
And I was sitting here in my bathrobe before,
right?
right? Because I couldn't find my bathrobe for a week because the cleaning ladies, the housekeeping ladies were here.
Oh
And it
my.
turns out that they took some of my dirty laundry and put it in a plastic bag in the back of the bottom of my walk-in closet.
Oh my.
And so I'm thinking of I need a rebate for the hour it took me to find them.
Good luck with that.
That won't happen, but it'll make a funny thing. Anyway, so I decided that we're actually get dressed for you too. So not only
it's just
you understand, you show up in the jacket and the tie, you're a doctor, you got the background and the flags, the whole thing. You know, you got instant charm and legitimacy. You know, I got to show up here. I can't show up in a bathrobe. I mean,
no, that won't do.
Who lived in a barrel there in Greece?
Oh my, yeah, Diogenes.
Diogenes living in a barrel. Anyway, so
what a wild man.
I think all three of us share. We're trying to find an honest man. Anyway,
right.
Anyway, so did you notice that you got some love and affection from?
It's very well appreciated. Thank you.
They actually really love you, given how little you say and how dry the fact is, stoic you are. It's kind of funny how much affection you get from the. And I have always forget how many people follow us but don't say anything.
Oh.
Like I got emails this week from stuff like, how would you know that unless you were actually paying really close attention, right? Can you send me this? Because I don't remember your name. And then somebody I love dearly finally came back today.
That's nice.
So and I consider him a fellow traveler.
That's good.
He's written a very good book. He doesn't have his real name on it though, because he's a somebody, and you can't be a somebody and write a good book.
There are limits. You know, in this current simulation of civil society,
yes. Which is a topic I want to make a video on, which is the limits, how we use limits-based reasoning, full accounting, and first principles, and how that relates to decidability. Because you can always make a choice, but when you have to get it down to those criteria, a first principle that's fully accounted at the right, and that's limits-based reasoning. What are the limits? So you're saying I'm taking an account of all consequences,
right?
All causes and consequences. So by first principles, you got all causes, and by limits, you got all consequences, and by full accounting, you got everything in between. So that's one that needs a PowerPoint, I think, because it's really not obvious. I mean, excuse me, I think it's obvious,
right?
What we're doing, right? It's not obvious, and it's not even obvious to our team. So, although I keep getting surprised by Martin, he's probably got the same thing now. He's like, Martin's at that point where it's, well, how could you not see that, right? I mean, he's getting there, and Brandon is there, so it's like he's always doing the thing of, well, that's obvious. That's not, but we're taking them here, and I'm like, yeah, but they don't know how we got from here to here. They can't know how we're going to get from here to there,
right?
It's like pedagogy pedagogy doesn't mirror your growth, your current state. You have to drag them along through their whole thing. So I have to talk a little bit about that, because I don't
No.
really cover it, even in the stuff I wrote that's quite thorough on the logics. I focus on the properties and especially falsificationism, right? Falsification is the way you find the limit, right?
Right.
So you use falsification to try to find those limits, whether they be first principles or and fully accounted end consequences. And you can't understand that unless you understand the four sciences, the before, during, and after sciences, and the language and the grammars we use to describe them. So it's like it's like everything we do. You have to understand like 10 things to get like the basic. Once you understand those 10 things, the first principle is trivial.
Right.
Right. But until you get those things, right, the first principle is.
I know it's interesting to me because in my reflection on this morning was that I'm just reading the news feeds, and my reflection on it was this: is the interesting nature of it is my resolution on understanding what we're doing is increasing as applied to current situations, which is I can see the connections between things better than I did a week ago, because it's like I'm looking at a problem, a social problem manifesting in international spaces, and then I go, I understand it in a way that I didn't understand it, right? And it's more refined than it was. And there's not much difference in understanding, but it's much more refined and solidifying the case.
Mhm.
That the conclusions that we reach when we talk about human behavior at scales is clear what's happening. And it's just amazing to me that it can do that. And just like I say, you just focus your attention on it in a diffuse way. Then when you look at a particular connection, and it's just a very nice line, and it's wonderful.
It's rewarding that other people see that depth. You know what I mean? It's so rewarding to know that it's not impossible for other people to see that depth. I want to tease you so bad right now, and I'm withholding it because it would be very untrue, but it would be such a great opportunity.
Your forbearance is recognized.
But you know, and the guys the team keeps surprising me. Even with I had a wonderful call with Luke, who I see as an innovator in his space. He's an innovator, and during the call, it became apparent to me, and he said something afterwards, that he actually gets insight from talking to me about his work. Right? He sees new ways of thinking about it, a new way. Not all the time, but there's some
Right.
get something out of it. And I get something out of talking to him about his work, because he does look at it almost like a father. He looks at civilization like a father, just like I look at it maybe as a king or a justice. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
And that perspective is really valuable to me. Just like Noah sees it as a father and maybe a priest, right? And I find that so fascinating that we all have this responsibility kick, right? That we feel we have to be responsible, and it's because we were all responsible for ourselves and more at such a young age. And then you realize that's, of course, the problem. But I get this joy. That's the problem for society, right? Is the absence of pressure to bear responsibility for the costs and consequences. But anyway, so So in the context of our discussion, it's just wonderful to see you and the other guys, and it's reflective, right? I mean, I get better because you guys, I mean, you do this to me all the time. It's like, oh, that's how normies see it, right? I mean, that's what you teach me all the time, is the folly of my assumptions. Is that funny to you?
It's not really folly. It's like, oh, you skip 10 steps, man. Dudes are lost. They're gonna get lost.
So anyway, which I'll never get, it's like, that's my big problem in life, right? Is I can't associate with neurotypical, with ordinary people's thinking. It's, I just can't. I can't understand it unless it's explained to me. Then it makes sense, right? But until it's explained to me, I can't. So, but anyway, I don't want to talk about me. The point is that you've looked at the world, and you get an increase in precision, and you can see that from all our guys. And what they say is that's where their mindfulness comes from. Now, you had mindfulness before because you're naturally stoic. But how has it changed your emotional perception of the world?
Oh,
see, that's
a weird question.
That's not an interesting question.
That's a weird question. It's like, thinking about it. Yeah, I just don't get mad about stuff. It's like the interesting thing is, like, I watched, I had a fellow come into the office this week, and he was literally mad. And he's like, he was mad. And he was mad because he watches the news and it maddens him because he's powerless. Yep. And he's talking about parking lead where we ought not talk about it being Does that make sense? And I said, you're saying the quiet part out loud. We don't talk about that. And he couldn't stop. He raised his voice. Well, he raised his voice and he's being real loud. And I'm like, okay, because he's mad. He
feels safe with you.
And that's okay too. And I'm like, okay, we just don't talk about that part. We just don't do it. And he calmed down, which was okay too. I said, it's all right, because it's like, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, but it's like, we just don't talk about that part. That's going to cause the undue attention of authorities that we don't want to talk to. We don't want their attention.
Right.
So it's like, so it allows me to modulate that emotional response to the maddening situation we find ourselves in, because it's like, okay, you got to tone it down and work the situation, given the fact that these emotional impulses are coming through, and use that energy to propel you in a direction that is functionally useful.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think it has done for me, because it's like, okay, it's easy to get mad because it's like the robbery and the murder and all this other stuff that's gone on is such criminality that it needs to be punished. And it's like, well, okay, I always describe it like this. I say I subscribe to the Robert F. Kennedy Sr. school of thought, which is, you don't get mad, get even.
Even, exactly.
So that's all. You just work on what is it? What do I got to do to get even for this? Oh my God, it's just such a criminality. It's okay.
This scale of criminality is hard to imagine is possible. Right. I mean, it's obvious when it's like Mao or Stalin.
Right, but it's like of a scale that's like puts those guys, those are within the context of the greater criminality, like it's just a subset.
Yes.
It's like, wow.
So anyway, well, I wanted to make sure we covered that issue, closed that issue. The issue was that people, you get mindfulness out of this knowledge. I mean, for me, I didn't realize that's what I was pursuing. Right? For me, it's like, I want to be able to speak as I think. I want a language for my thoughts, right? that became, right? What's so hard?
That's a funny thing. It's like this incoherent experience needs to be properly translated
Exactly.
for other viewers.
Yes. And then it became a thing when the Gulf War started and the liberals were doing their talking points, and the conservatives, right? This is what gave birth to Fox News, is the need to react to the progressives just getting up there and doing talking points, which was propagandizing. And so I was really offended, partly because when I was in college, I was asked to write a bunch of reviews for the newspaper of conservative books.
Okay.
And so what it came to be very clear to me is that these people are basically trying to speak Protestant ethics in secular terms. In other words, they're trying to create a moral, so somewhat like Kant did. Kant tried to create a rational moral framework. They were trying to create a secular moral framework in the English language, which it only matters if you already agree with it. It has no persuasive content to it at all. Certainly had no scientific basis to it at all. So all those conservative thinkers were, and then of course we got the neocons, which wiped out the voice of the conservatives, because neoconservatism was more of an ideological framework than the the secular Christian version that, what's his name? I want to say Kirk. What's his name? Russell Kirk? No. What's his name is escaping. Anyway, so I wrote a bunch of reviews, and I was like, they were disappointing, right? To me, as someone who's basically thinks scientifically. And so, so by the time I got into I'm like watching these debates, and it's making me nuts because the conservatives sound like idiots. And so I'm like, well, they're not saying what they're trying to say isn't idiotic. They just don't know how to talk about it. So how
so
can
their incapacity, their linguistic capacity is insufficient for the task.
Right. And so I said, well, I just need to make a universally commensurable, value neutral language of ethics and politics. Why is that left?
It goes to this. This is me 2 years ago. I said, Curt, what on earth would cause you to begin this venture? And he says, no sane person would
do this, right? Exactly.
Because it's such a big task. It's like this. So it's like, this is the beginning. This is the seed. You've identified the seed. It's like, the language is insufficient. I'm going to have to tighten it up a little bit.
When you say it like that, it's ridiculous.
It's Diogenes. He's gone. He's off to the races, baby.
It's not like I understood what I was taking on.
I know that's what's making me chuckle about it.
Right? I'm like, I think I can do this, right? I mean,
God, I got this.
I got this. I can do this, right? Oh my God. Pandora's box.
That's about when I roll in. I'm like, my God, this guy's got so much on his plate. I'm gonna have to help him because I feel obligated to help you.
I've done my legal stuff, my economic stuff, my scientific epistemology, I know my history and all this other nonsense. And, of course, at the time I had just given up on AI, right? Because the hardware wasn't there about this time, which is why I went into the legal stuff, is because it was a place I could make procedural AI instead of neural, right? I mean, it was an obvious, I guess it's not obvious why I would go from building companies to being told your health is going to collapse, to saying, okay, well, I'll go into work on AI. And I realized I think it didn't take me that long. It was a few years, that this is, I know how to solve. If I understood then how thoroughly I understood the problem, I would have just stayed with it. Yes. But I didn't actually understand it, how well I understood the problem until far later. So I went from that and I went into the legal thing because, the legal business, because law needed the AI work. And I saw this great economic opportunity there. And so once you're there, once I was there, I started focusing more on the relationship between economics and law.
Mm.
And that really pulled it together. And then I realized I'm just following Hayek's track, which
Ah.
is he went from cognitive science, which is his first book,
Mm.
to economics, to law. And I just went it the other way around. And I went from cognitive science, which is AI, to law, to economics. But it's the same journey, and I end up in the same fucking place. And I end up being a Popperian, right? A falsificationist, just like Hayek did, right?
Okay.
So you sort of see, okay, I'm just sort of ending up here. But it was just really a simple thing of I can solve this problem. I can solve this problem.
Here's my assessment. It's the trials and tribulations of a pachinko ball. Just ending up in the right spot. This is my problem to
And I'm like, God, you could have just told me.
No, this is way more amusing.
That's the way I look at it.
I got to get his jollies out of you somehow. Watching you hit the pins, man.
At least give me a treat once in a while, Anyway,
That's right.
I'm not. I'm getting, not that I have that much hair up here anymore, Brad, but I'm starting to go gray.
Oh,
I've always had a little gray here for a few years, but I'm starting to get gray up here. I'm catching up. Anyway, so what we talk? I
got a ways to go, brother, to catch up.
Catch up to you? Yes, but I'll never be as distinguished.
That's right.
All right. So anyway, God, the problem with we talked in the middle of the week too. What we worked one day this week too, didn't we? Worked Wednesday.
That's right.
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 The problem is talking to you on the weekends is the first part of Saturday is so much fun catching up.
Right.
Right. So anyway, what were we talking about? I was trying to make a point. I said maybe we should record this, and now we spent 29 minutes.
No, right. No, hang on. I wasn't taking notes. That portion.
Okay. Do you want to say something then?
No, I'm thinking about it. I was thinking about weaponized autism. And it's like weaponized autism has an interesting function. And it's like this. It's like other civilizations do it too. They do it differently based on the founding principles of that civilization. So it goes back to their fundamental institutions. I think you're processing.
Okay, that's the correct way to frame it. I was trying to figure out because there's a basic argument that Europeans are more autistic. In other words,
that's a different function.
Right. And so I was like, okay, is it just that, or is Brad right that it's no? Brad's right. It's that the function is in every civilization. It's just more easily expressed in Western civilization.
Right. And it's like the issue is when we have these other civilization people interloping and competing for control of our civilization and actually being victorious momentarily, they monopolize and drive out the expression of our intrinsic autism and try to channel their autism in particular mechanisms that are convergent with the civilization of origin that they represent.
Right. In other words, people never give up their metaphysical predispositions of their race, civilization, and race. They just don't. And so, is that true?
I think they can.
I don't know of any exceptions. The weird ones are some of the Southeastern Slavs.
Okay.
So you find extraordinary minds in Hungarians, in some Slovenians, right? You can find, in other words, and they're outside the major influence, right? But as long as they were under one of the Habsburgs or the the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they seem to be positively disposed for some number of years. You look at what the Russians did, and we don't like to talk about this because it's hard for Westerners to accept it. In many areas, the Russians were better than we were because they organized their society to produce scientific revolutions, and not in competition with economics or other virtue signaling like we had here in the West. So they were very effective at it. So that's it. It's very hard because you look at China and you look at all the AI stuff coming out of China, and some of them, or all the people in AI with Chinese names, which is
Okay.
a lot of them, are very good at it because it's mathematics. The way they're approaching is mathematically. The theory seems to all be coming from Europeans, but the incremental improvement seems to be coming from them. And so I look at it and I'm like, well, you know, would you call Confucius in the same caliber as Socrates? Well, of course, absolutely. He couldn't. There's no way to solve the problem of politics in China. So he was bound. He had an artificial limit on his reasoning.
Yes.
Right. So he chose a different strategy, but the quality of his work is the same. Did they produce an Aristotle? Well, no, but you have to have a Socrates to have a Plato to have an Aristotle. I mean, you've got to have the back and forth, right? As one against the other against the other. You've got to have the sequence. It's like you need, you know, what is it? Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart. You know, you've got to have, I can't remember the order, but you've got to have that combination to produce that distribution.
Right.
If I think of India, you could see it happening. I can't remember the guy's name now. I mean, Hindu names, you know, I mean, that's like, okay, I have no lexical framework to remember the names with, which makes me feel stupid, but I
get the same.
It's just my ignorance of the language, so I can't do it. Like Chinese, I sort of get Chinese, right? But I don't really understand I don't understand the Indian, or that way of thinking is just bizarre. But you could see it happening. I mean, their political science around the year 10 was starting to happen, and it was looking really good. Right? So, but it couldn't. I mean, how do you overcome that problem of India, which is just demographics? How do you overcome it? Effing can't. You know, what's Africa's problem? How do you overcome that problem? Demographics, which is the problem, which produces a problem of institutions. Well, I don't know how to, right? They're figuring it out, but it's not going very well. Although what we're seeing right now with the Niger trying to ally with the Soviets, so they can, the Niger military aligning with the Russians, so they can replace the democratic government with a military junta, right? The local Africans aren't putting up with that shit, which is the first step in Africa becoming an organized civilization. So I'm pretty proud of them. I mean, and this is like in that part of Africa where there's still Islam, right? So it's not down in the part that's highly Christian. So, I mean, so that's a pretty positive sign. So, in any event, so when you look at these civilizations, then you look at, we go back to the Muslims, the Middle East. We have the Jews. Well, the Jews saw what the Europeans were doing with law, and they went back to dug up their law, and they worked with that. And that's why they think, they think feminine, but they think like us, is because they're a law-based culture too. The difference is that, between their law and their religion, our law and our aristocracy, right? Our law, aristocracy, and our religion, our priesthood, and our need to maintain land, and them as diasporics or shepherds. They're shepherds in the first place, diasporics second. They have a different bias toward everything. But if you look at it, you can see the difference in the Jewish equivalent of autism right? And
You know,
the
they weaponize their autism by putting those guys to work generating bait into hazard
right, which is
that satisfies the interests of their tribe.
other things. There are things I wish I didn't know because I could just be angry and not think about it. You know what I mean? That's one of those things. Now that I understand it, it both pisses me off, but I realize it's bot.
It's
Right?
just a bot doing his, just running his
Bot, right? I mean,
program.
they don't fucking know what they're doing. So, of course,
If I forgive them, they know not what they do, right?
exactly. So, it's like everybody else. So the net result is that you sort of become mindful, right? This is where I say I get mindfulness out of this work too. In any event, so you said you asked about weaponized autism. So
Yeah.
did we cover that point well enough? Did we get across?
What it does is that the limits of the autist's capacity to express themselves is limited by the logics, languages, and grammars of their civilization, which they come from, and they're going to be held in. This is what was interesting, because I was thinking about the trying to get people to adapt to the your civilization. And it's, you get these guys coming from, they're smart people coming from other civilizations, have been invited in, and other ones too, and they're being held in place by justificationary thinking that they are going to hold on to,
Right.
and they're going to double down on, and that doesn't work. That won't work. The justification,
and it's also, they feel the need to persist this Jewish supremacy issue for a bunch of reasons. Well, I mean, first, it's part of the feminine thinking, but it's also just as a diasporic people, there's an advantage to it, and it helps keep it an insular community that's less likely to integrate and disappear. So it makes perfect sense.
right?
But, you have a dispute with I can talk to a rabbi, an educated rabbi, about this, and I'll say, well, I can say the truth. Well, this is what he says. It was logical for us to do that. It wasn't. It was the best we could do at the time, right?
Right.
You won't have, but to somebody who's just who's not an educated rabbi, who's just a practicing Jew or just cultural Jew, they have a very hard time with it. Well, you say, you specialized in baiting in the hazard. Right. I mean, that's why you were kicked out of everywhere. And the truth is, you're still doing it. And this is because your metaphysics, your understanding of the world is feminine. And, you can say that to some of them. They're like, shit, that's right. Well, I still got to go. I still got to stay. My people still got to stay. I completely respect that. Right. I mean, they're not lying. As long as it's true. Right. I mean, then it's not a problem for me, right? I mean, it's like gypsies. I mean, are they going to be gypsies if they don't?
No.
I did it on purpose. I walked you right into it, and I got the reaction.
It's a good trap. That was a good
You didn't
one.
see it coming fast enough that you could give me your usual stoic face.
I had all kind of images of people being robbed. Like real fast, like boom, all of a sudden.
How do you take? I mean, I think the IQ of gypsy is really low. Like it's under 85, the average, right? They don't have a lot going for them, right? So you're drinking just to mask your facial expression. You are. I know what you're doing. Curt's dishing truth here. I don't want to be associated with.
Okay, hit me, man.
I know, but I'm gonna be supportive of them, right? That's what but I gotta lay the truth out there so I can be supportive. Is that, look, they've lived for a long time with a very low IQ by specializing in two things that are doing the labor that nobody else wants to do, right? Sort of like food picking, right? Prostitution, fortune telling, and petty theft. The thing is, what they do with their petty theft is they keep it low enough that it's not worth killing them.
That's right. It's not worth.
It's only worth getting rid of them.
It's just annoyance.
It's an no, it's a right. It's like, oh fuck, it's like, right.
It's not profitable enough to chase them down. It's not worth the effort.
And it's hard because it's basically the problem of where the fuck are they?
Yeah, but see, this is a government has done the same thing with like speeding. It's like it's just enough to annoy you, and you're gonna pay, and it's like, and just take it like a man.
Yes. So anyway, but how would they maintain themselves as a people otherwise?
Right.
They can't.
So this is look. So they get chased around some. They're migratory people, and they get chased around some. And I don't know if they've ever been. I know the Third Reich attempted to remove them all from Germany, and but it's like they haven't been kicked out of 109 countries yet, to my knowledge. Like systematically extracted because they have a limit on how much. How annoyed the government is going to get at them. Yeah.
Right. They're a local threat, not a political threat. Right. They're a civil problem, not a political problem. Right. That's correct. But if you said how many communities have kicked out of
right.
all of them
with some frequency.
Name one. I mean, yeah, I just looked it up. 70 to 83. So remember, it's a goofy population distribution. So in other words, it's African. They're not going to do well. They found a way to survive as a gene pool. When the answer is, it'll go, there's some groups, who's trying to integrate them. I think it's Romania is trying to integrate them. This is the problem, right? Is that you can't integrate it. You can't integrate but half. And if they're 85s, you can't integrate but half of them anyway. That means half. Well, I mean that the half is going to do what the blacks do, which is keep the other half down. Because if that upper half leaves them behind, then they're dead. I mean, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton knew this. We got to abuse the white folk and guilt them. But if we actually separate from them, we're dead. We're done. The dead is the wrong word. We're done, right? Because they can't. And I'm like, that's not true. If you look at the distribution, there's enough black people who are capable of middle class functioning that at least that within their own communities, they could develop the same institutions, right? And have all the protection of the European civilization around them. And they were doing it. That's why they made so much progress before the civil rights era. And it's certainly not looking good since then. Anyway. So, anyway, what was I trying to get at there? Okay, so I was trying to get at, you brought up the question of.
So I was interested in justificationary thinking, which everyone's going to do, that allows their group to persist.
Right.
And it is based on the logics, languages, and grammars available to them based on their institutional framework of the civilization that they spring from.
Right. Now, I'm going to say a couple of controversial things. Are you ready?
Oh my.
Come on, I expected.
That's what we call fair warning.
Yeah. Okay, so number one is, I don't think it's right to ask any people to disappear. In other words, it's irreciprocal.
Yes.
It is not irreciprocal to assist everybody in evolving.
Right.
Right. That means that your culture will change to suit the demographic distribution of your people.
Right.
Number two is there are really bad ideas. Islam is a really bad idea.
Okay.
Right? There are really bad ideas. So, tyranny is a really bad idea. Right? There are really bad ideas, whether it's underclass tyranny of Islam or the upper class tyranny of pick any tyrant. Any time, from any class for that matter. But there's a real a systemic problem is that you can only cooperate with marginal indifference. Like, how could we cooperate with colonial Africans? Well, you couldn't. You had to civilize them before they could have the institutions sufficient for producing contract. Right? So you can't. How could we cooperate with the Amerindians? Well, this is, since my family was sort of involved in some of this, I'm familiarly aware of the difficulty of cooperating with people who conceive of the world as the opposite of what you do and view killing the other tribe to get advantage. In other words, I might compete with, another company, right? Until the point I can acquire them, right? But they didn't do that. They're like, I want to have the monopoly of trade with white people because it gets me access to metal. And so I'm going to kill the other tribe. Right? How do you cooperate with those people? Right? And then they start a fight with you because they don't want you to cooperate with the tribe that's going to kill them. Right? I mean,
right.
So the problem you have is that, and this is controversial, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, is that if you are addicted to a culture, a set of metaphysical, physical principles, beliefs, and strategies, that means that you are a threat to the more advanced people, then that's a problem. And so you can teach this, you can solve this problem two ways. You can solve it through a way we have tried as American, which is baiting them into the modern economy with free trade and protection. Or you can do it the way the Chinese are doing with the Uyghurs, which is putting them in re-education camps so they're de-Muslimized, right? Or you can do it the way, so who raised what ancient city to the ground?
That's not specific enough.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to, I can't remember.
That didn't work at all.
I'm trying to pull up my Assyrian history in my head. And I'm like, okay, I can't separate this from the Mongols and whatever. So if you can't, so with the Mongol, I'll give there's a famous example of Genghis Khan. Like, if you fucking go along with it, we're going to extract some tribute, and this trade route will be free, and then we can tax everybody, and we'll be all happy, right? Right? But they didn't. They fought. Well, they killed fucking everybody and burnt the town to the ground.
Yes.
Right. So you can't develop a trade route if these people in the city make their living off of raiding it.
Right.
Right, because it's producing a cost on everybody.
Right.
The example I used to give, I can't remember who I was talking to. I've repeated this example because I used to use it in my money talk where I would teach everybody who would join the company on how money works or how economies work. I started with money so I could teach them how economies work. So I said, you just see those beautiful castles on the passes in the Alps, right? There's gorgeous castles. You realize that's a troll bridge.
Yeah.
Right. That is a troll bridge. You go through and you pay. That's why you built the castle. That's because there's only one way to go, and you can tax the trade. Right. Right.
But it's like I did
offer protection services.
I did meditations on this, okay? And so what it turns into is like this is like it is the Western civilization is based upon the organization of violence. And the problem is the taxation was previously disorganized, and there's thieves on the roads. And so you build the castle so that you organize the violence and collect all the money in one location in a nice, systematic, orderly manner. Well, genteel and lawful.
I described this in the book as as you move from distributed graft, like
That's right.
every chieftain, every head of, or every person who can is rent seeking,
That's
to
right.
the development of a military force that takes all the rent seeking away from that layer and then produces economic velocity because of it. So
That's
it's
right.
actually a benefit, right? So you don't
It's
think,
unintended. It's just it's like an emergent property. Look at that, it helped.
right? But so no, it's a service. I mean, it's a public service, right? I mean, if you're an individual, right, you're like, I'm paying taxes, but you know, the what really happens is prices go down. It's like why I hate value added tax. It's like restoring all those fucking middlemen.
Right. And you're taking uncertainty out of the equation, because if I have to go through this past when the brigands were about, I might lose everything, or I
Yes.
might, but it's just to take your chunk, move
Yeah.
along.
Yeah, and it's so prices, I mean, basically trade increases, prices drop, and since uncertainty goes, risk increases, so more productivity, and eventually out of trade, we get markets. Right? So the centralization of power, it turns out to be a good, if it's suppression of rents, is good. Right? But then you get the Italian problem. I love using Italian. I love picking on Italians, right? Because everything went wrong in Italy at some point or other. So you have an
Right.
example. You have an example of everything that can possibly go wrong, and there's an Italian example of everything. So what happens in Italy, of course, is that as Italy lost its position as trade moved away from Venice
Yes.
into the North Sea and the Atlantic and the world trade. In other words, Venice and Italy were no longer the route by which trade entered
Right.
Europe. What happened is that, of course, the nobility became extractive. And so this is why, especially in like Sicily is the great example, is you actually need protection. You need protection. And so those middlemen come back.
They become the protector.
They become the protection.
Rent seekers.
Right. But it's like, which rent seeker do you want? Do you want the rent seeker in the center? What you really want is you want a central rent seeker that's not abusive. It's actually providing a service, not seeking rents, right? He's suppressing local rents in order for central services, and that's
Right.
okay.
Right. So this looks like this is what the problem of the Roman Catholic Church, which is they limited the rents. They knew that there was a limit. It's a 10% rule. If you take more than that, you're gonna get in trouble. And it's like what happened was they started doing the limit of corruptibility was the problem of the Catholic Church. And it's like the Protestantism grew out of the capacity needed to be expanded for the rent seeking.
Okay, the problem was indulgences.
Yes.
So the church wanted to build St. Peter's, right? You know, so they wanted to have this massive, because St. Peter's is basically the equivalent of the pyramids.
Right.
Right? And so they're trying to build this place. And so what's happening, of course, is that that's all well and good when you're in Italy, and Italy's this trade hub for the western edge of the Silk Road, you know, Transatlantic. But you know, that's also happening at the same time the Age of Sail is coming about.
Right.
And so Italy's under trying to keep its status, maintain its pressure. So there's a lot of things going on. So if you look at that, the church starts charging indulgences. That's how they get away from the minimum, the maximum tax.
That's them being bad.
That's them being bad. And so sort of like how the academy today used to be training our upper people to be members of participants in the society, but they figure out they can sell, they can win because of the prohibition on IQ testing and personality testing. They figured out that they can require a diploma instead, so they can charge $100,000 instead of have a business pay for your personality test, IQ test, right? So now the thing that used to cost, they should have cost $50, costs you $150,000. And what's the real difference? The real difference is that now only people who can afford to get the debt can get an indulgence, which allows you access not to heaven, but into a white collar job.
Right.
And what's the real difference? Well, if we had personality and IQ tests, we'd know better than we do with college tests. Anyway, and we would save ourselves. And then we wouldn't have to sell people these false promises the academy promise, especially women. Like, it's like I always laugh at how many women's degrees guarantee you will have a lower income than if you didn't go to college, especially in social science or government. You will have a lower income than if you didn't go to college if you get in those degrees.
Oh my.
Which cracks me up.
Oh my.
So, that is what it encouraged the academy to do, is to sell things, indulgences, to people who are no longer capable of actually advancing the state and maintaining harmony and order, right? But instead become self-actualizing actors for their own benefits, not only within the state, but within the academy.
Okay, so I want to back up a step to go back to the mountain pass, okay? Because what was essential for this process to occur, and I'm talking about the academy, is we have to make a mountain pass where there is none. So we have to create a monopolistic system. And this was what was done. It was a monopolistic system. Was you need this paper to pass.
Yes.
So they had to funnel everybody by building gates around the freedom of action of the individuals, unless they go through the pass and pay the toll.
So you get such a flawless demonstration of this. There's some group online, I don't know who it is. I'm sure I've saved the video because it's just a perfect example to use in a course, where they get a bunch of people together who don't know each other, and they're all about the same age, and then they all have their IQ tests. They have them all.
Oh, I saw this one, I think.
Right. And so they ask them who's got the highest IQ.
Everybody's supposed to rank everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, the chick with all the degrees turns out to have the lowest IQ. And she's so confident in herself when she has lowest IQ. Well, this is the midwit syndrome. This is the problem I have with the academy, is why we are in this problem of you're fighting midwits all the time, and it's exasperating because they have a false sense, when the fucking guy who's an electrician, right? He's an electrician. He's way smarter than you are. He also makes more money than you do. But because he's in a trade, you think that, or even if he doesn't make money, you're making the wrong judgment about him. When the reality is, there's no way I'm going to replace that fucking electrician. But that female clerical worker, she's going to be gone in 5 years, just like a lot of programmers will be gone. So I don't know. I just found that very interesting, is that we get this all the time. And, I get this all the time with guys. They're like, my IQ is probably only 115 or so, but I do really well. And well, it's because you're not thinking stupid shit.
It's like this. It's like, well, I'm going to translate that for the audience, okay? Just because it was Curt's rendition of it was a little bit rough. It goes like this. It's like this. It's like, when you're thinking, you're actually thinking, and you're not confused by the things you think are thoughts erroneously. Does that make sense? It's like this. So there's, oh my,
You're actually thinking.
I have
you're confused. You're
just simply mistaken. I said this to a patient. I said, when you're laying asleep, you're trying to go to sleep, and your thoughts are just can't stop, and you can't stop your thoughts. That you're not really thinking. You just think you're thinking, and you're wrong.
Yes.
You're being possessed by your mind.
Yes.
And it's those bots running the programs, right?
Yeah. Well, what's funny, if you explain to people the neuroscience, what's going on, it's actually really simple. you know what old carburetor used to do?
Yeah,
And so basically it's like this thing goes around in a circle and it fires spark plugs
yeah,
as it goes around in the circle. The faster it goes, the faster the spark plugs turn, the faster the engine goes. Right. So it's but your brain does a thing like this, and it's like remember something, perceive something,
right.
reinforce or remember something, perceive something, predict something, remember something. I can't remember the order,
Right.
But it so basically does that sequence. And so what's happening in your brain when you're laying down and you're relaxing, and the less it's the same thing as being in a sensory deprivation chamber,
Yes,
is that the noise from that circuit is not receiving a signal that's allowing you to regulate what gets your attention.
that's it.
That's all that's happening. It's
Wait,
really simple.
The problem is you're paying attention to it.
That's right.
And it will run faster.
Right. So the only answer is what everybody teaches you to do. So I learned it when I was young, because I have, of course, the autism problem of it never shuts the fuck up. Right. So excuse me, I did it again, didn't I? Is that you just sit there and you focus on relaxing your body so that there is a focus.
That's
You
right.
fall asleep every freaking time, right? I mean, it takes some discipline, right? But it's like anything else, like riding a bicycle. You just practice it.
But
And
it's the
fair enough.
same thing with anxiety systems.
Yes.
It's paying attention to something that isn't merit your attention.
Attention. Which is what really what are we trying to teach people with mindfulness?
What do you pay attention
What
to?
do you pay attention to? That's all it is. And it's like, I love the simplicity of the Buddhist thing. I mean, it's like so stupidly obvious that it works.
Right.
The Stoic thing is different. It's like it's externally focused. It's real world. What are my goals? What did I do today to pursue this? Was it under my control? No, doesn't matter. Did those things that were in control. So it's just, what is prayer? Prayer is the next level down from Buddhism, right? Or maybe it's a triangle, right? Because the other one is sport.
Yes.
So you just get down there, and a sport will, of course, force you into a bodily frame.
Yes.
Right, which will release the anxiety, which will.
Because you don't have enough time to pay
You
attention
can't, right?
This silly thing.
So you have the physical, you have the external verbal, you have the internal Buddhist self-regulation, you have the prayer, which is basically ritual, right? Because that's what you're really trying to. I mean, all these things. That's why religions work. Is ritual allows you to regulate your attention so that you're not captured by auto association. I mean, it's really that simple. So that's what mindfulness is, and that's why it's harder to be a woman. Is because those emotions are louder, and they're always in parallel, and they're always auto association in the moment. And so, and they add neuroticism to it, which is fear, right? And
right.
I was taught a better word. The word I was taught was blame avoidance, right? I prefer my word, the word I was taught, the way I was taught in neuroticism, to the word, in other words, but in the literature, it's called neuroticism or worry, right?
Yeah.
What's worry? Blame avoidance, right? It's a social it's a social property.
So let's turn that science it a little better, which is the blame avoidance is social status defensive mechanism.
Correct. And what's your first measure after survival? Social status. After survival, social status is the thing you worry about most. I mean, it's the most influential measure. I used to, go ahead.
Defines the cooperative potential.
Right. Abilities. And so I was like, well, what does responsibility mean? Well, what a responsibility can be in conflict with or in support of neuroticism. You're worried, socially. So the more responsibility I have, the more I can demonstrate, the more likely it is that I'm not going to be subject to anxiety. So what happens when women try to avoid responsibility? They increase their potential for anxiety. I mean, it's just like once you got to stop thinking like a brain and think like a brainstem. Think like a fish. I mean, it's like it's because that's what's doing all this stuff, right? It's just way down in there.
Okay.
That's not really true. It's more in the midbrain.
So it is, no, it is like a fish, though. It is like, so it's like fish school. Okay. Yep. And the fish is in the middle of the school.
It's safe.
Paying attention to the other fish that are in their proximity because they can't see what's going on the outside really at all.
Yep.
They only react to what the crowd is doing because that's probably the best answer to this quiz.
And that's why we all feel that feeling that we get, we call revelation, or the spiritual feeling. Excuse me. Revelation is a change in state. That feeling we call spirituality is that feeling. It's so the safety
flow with the group.
Right. It's this. I call it the running with the pack because that's the literature I first got it from. Was the running? It was called the safety of running with the pack. It's somewhat like the safety you feel when you're driving a car.
Yeah.
Riding a horse because you can get away. It's the same thing with running with a pack. It's the same thing. I don't know if it's people who run marathons are probably really. It's not the same, but if you watch a bunch of there's beautiful videos of this, a bunch of Maasai marching across the horizon. You know how safe those guys feel. I know what it's like to go prowling through the woods with a high-powered rifle. I mean, it's fucking spiritual. You have 10 other guys with you. What are you afraid of? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. It's spiritual. So what are we telling everybody? This is to tie in with Luke's work. So what are we telling everybody? You're absolutely powerless. Right? You can't feed yourself, you can't water yourself, you can't survive with it, right? You're dependent upon all these other people. And you know what? You keep getting signals, these people don't give a shit about you because you're irrelevant. So that, he's trying to suppress neuroticism, right? In his way.
I know, like from a very basic level. It's like, here, you don't need to do that. You can just do these things, learn how to make some chord. I thought that was cool.
The problem is his book needs to be like, it needs to be a camp.
Yeah.
Right. It's more, he's saying do it yourself. But I mean, people should just
you just have them over.
Right.
Come over and we'll make chord as a group.
Yeah.
And it will be chord making time and we'll make chord.
No, and it's best because so what we were discussing is it's what Boy Scouts used to do. It gave you basic survival skills. Right? How to make fire, how to, make bedding, how to, how to find water, how to figure out what direction it was, how to look at the weather, how to make a shelter, right? And you realize and of course, then we used to go hunting. So how do you, I've cleaned fish, bird, I hated the squirrels. I'm like, what the fuck? Why bother? There's nothing there.
Right.
Squirrel, right? Pheasant and duck and goose and deer, right? I've never done I've been there for a cow, but I've never done a cow, right? It's the same thing as a deer and just bigger, right? So you get these things and you're like, okay, you learn how to do this. But the problem is, Luke and I are talking about, we just take it for granted. And one of the things that Moritz has been helpful in helping me understand, I want to compliment him, is I was really raised to be aristocracy in the old tradition. I never thought of it that way. This is just, you're responsible for everything. It's the New England Puritan, right? So I didn't think of that as aristocratic. You're military. You're military, you're priesthood, you're businessman, you're all these things, and you're responsible. And I didn't
Right.
think about that. I didn't think about how the rules I was taught for like how to behave at the table or in speech and greeting people. These are military. This is military indoctrination for following rules that show you have discipline.
Yes.
Right? It's demonstrating military discipline in all aspects of life because then you can be trusted. Because you're not going to fall to impulse, right? How do you know? I didn't know that stuff. I mean, it's just isn't everybody taught this?
Goes like this. It's like it goes back to what I was talking about before, which is their unspoken justificationary propping up the persistence of whatever it is that your family is.
Yes.
Is unspoken and it is understood. It's not, we don't talk about it. We don't need to talk about that. We just, that's how we do it. And it persists.
Or the whiny apologetics of the lower classes if you ever get to hang out with their families. It's like they're not responsible for anything. They don't try to be responsible for anything. The responsibility is just what's at the table here. And other people do think it's like we're powerless or they're evil or whatever. Actually, they're just trying to be responsible. But what they're trying to be responsible for is more than what you're trying to be responsible for.
Right. Right. That one is the justification for is they're greedy.
Well, they may want more.
No. The
oh, I see.
The people of the lower class look at the upper class and think they're greedy because they want to be responsible for more. They justify their position and their difference between them as a negative attribution upon that.
This is the problem. This is the problem with I've noticed this a lot because you're seeing this happen because of the social media nonsense. But if you spent time with my grandfather or my great grandparents, right? My father said, the degree of which discipline and work affects every aspect of everyday life, and there is no relaxation except sitting at the end of the day, having a scotch and a bit of steak or something, saying, I accomplished all that today. Right? That's what relaxation means. Is it self-reward for accomplishment? Now, I've hung out with them. I mean, it's not, I haven't been exactly poor myself, but I mean, I've hung out with, those people with big names. And, and it's a little weird in tech because, I've got friends in tech that are just nerds who struck it rich. And then I have guys who are venture capitalists who've just been right a lot. Right? They're really good at looking at the whole spectrum and looking at a time horizon and figuring out, right? And you get trained by a venture capitalist is generally trained by another venture capitalist.
Yeah.
So right. So like one of the families, there's a big families right there. They have big families in the United States and they control vast amounts of money. Right. And there's about 80 of them. Right. There's probably more now because I've been out of this for 12 years now. So I don't really pay attention. Don't need to. And they control vast holdings and they have clerks that work for them and do investments for them. Right. But if you meet these people, they're no different from you and I, but they're way different from those people at the bottom. The difference between you and I is like, oh, fuck, at least for me, I don't want to do that. Like, I mean, the kind of guys that have, these 100, 300 foot yachts, right? I do not want to live like that. But they love it.
Huh.
They're basically athletes.
Yes.
We don't think of it that way, but their physiology, right? Their emotional, their psychological, and their physical composition allows them to work like that. It's not luck. I mean, there's luck involved in getting into the chain of opportunities, but your capacity to work like that, that's not a joke. I mean, because nothing's merciful.
That's right.
Money's not merciful. So it's not merciful at all. I mean, if you're, I'm going to pick on Nancy Pelosi because I like picking on the Pelosi's, but I mean, if you get paid that much money and indirectly you're becoming one of the wealthier people in your state, right? Because of secondary effects. I mean, or, if you're one of Putin's cronies and you're basically in charge of maintaining loyalty in this particular sector of the economy, from which point you get to buy a yacht. I mean, those are different things, but maintaining that loyalty isn't trivial either. Right. So, those people, the problem is those people don't see those other people.
Okay.
You see a Bill Gates on TV, but you've never been in a meeting with him and seen it rip somebody's psychological flesh off for their lack of discipline, thought, and intelligence. Why am I giving you money? I was there for one of those. You gotta. Thankfully, I was the beneficiary of the criticism, but right. So you don't want to be in that meeting, right? Because you've never seen that. Well, what it's like. I've talked to Steve Ballmer a bunch of times, right? And he's like the level of shit he's processing is just not possible for normal people to process. Right? Just so much stuff, and yeah, he's got an army below him.
Right.
Someone like Jobs, who's basically a genius, right? I mean, so he can hire other geniuses to work, and that makes the work easier. But I mean, even if you're talking about, Peter Thiel, right? I mean, he's smarter than I am, right? I mean, and he was evident at a very early age. And look at his work capacity. Look at his work capacity in his 20s. I look at Elon Musk, I'm like, that's the person I think like the most that I've ever seen or heard from, watch, behave. Right. And I can't work that hard. I could never do it. I mean, I can outwork almost anybody I've ever met, which was something people always said about me. Right. But no way could I work as hard as he does. It's impossible. So one of the problem I'm illustrating is that the reason this is happening is invisibility. It's a lack of proximity. The average guy doesn't have the ability to interact with what used to be the parish priest, who was the most educated person in his community. You know how valuable that was? Or the head of the manor, or he doesn't have that access. So what's happened with this whole structure is that we've lost the class system where I knew implicitly the limits of my responsibility, and I could feel good about myself as long as I fulfilled them. And we've broken people from the access to hierarchy, so they don't actually meet anybody who does that. And when we talk about these people, we talk about all the luxuries they experience. We don't talk about what their daily life is like, which I guarantee most people you could not do. Right? It broke my health. Right? It's going to break yours too. You couldn't do it. So why do they just don't have access to know? So they believe the stories.
There's no other way to gather information. It's just rumors.
Right. So who did I have an argument with? Some woman says, I work for these people. They don't work all that hard. And I was like, it's because you can't conceive. You can't conceive of what they're processing. Right? You only see the interactions you have with them. It's like there's families that have maintained the same families. There's families in Europe that have been wealthy for 700, 800 years. Right? I mean, I bring this up all the time, and I think it's Harpening that who brings this up? It's Harpening. Is that if you're a Norman family, you're still 20% ahead of the rest of the British population. It's genetics. It's also culture. Why? So what am I trying to get across here? It is reasonable in this point in time when people no longer have social interactions. They no longer, they basically have broken up the family. We've broken up social interactions. We've both broken up the civil society communities and organizations that were responsible for all those things like charities. And even we took away the civil organization of the hospitals, for Christ's sake. Right? Yeah, I know. I knew that would get you going. we have destroyed the history of the ethics of the Western civilization and why it actually works, because frankly, we were doing it by practice. In other words, inheritance, rather than by explicit articulation, which is what you and I are solving. Is
That's right.
We're explicitly articulating it, so it doesn't have to be just handed down.
No, so it's what's interesting, because it's like the interesting function of that is there's no motivation to articulate it if it's working.
Brilliant, yes.
And so we're sufficiently motivated because it's crashing around our ears, and it's like, what in the hell is breaking here? How did this work? And it's like, so this is the, you know, the motivation for rectification of error.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, so we were going to talk about something. Okay. Did I cover limits-based reasoning already?
We were talking about that.
Okay. So I covered that. Oh, shoot, I lost it. We talked about Niger.
Yes.
The Trump indictment, I don't suppose is worth talking about, but I'm sort of with Dershowitz in that the entire case is predicated on him not believing that the election was stolen. There's no way they're going to prove that, because he believed the election. I mean, I believed it. So did 100. So did half the fucking population. So you know, there's no evidence. So that's their whole case, is they have to
Yeah.
that he didn't
So
know the election was stolen. Well, if that happened, if he gets convicted by it, they're just going to raise it up to the Supreme Court, and they're going to come to the obvious. They're going to make it a matter of not politics, but of law, which is you have to prove that he had. There's just no way. Now,
Well,
I've
here's
seen
the
stuff
thing.
out there where they're trying to imply that he, as far as I can tell, he still thinks it was stolen, and so do a lot of people. Now, it might not have been stolen by any of the means we have caught people yet, right? And it might have been more to do with mail-in ballots, or you know, with the mail-in ballot scam, or it might have been due to the fact that they attacked Trump when in order to make the economy go bad, and they emphasized the pandemic in order to make the economy go bad, because that's really what was carrying his presidency, was the success of the economy. So, but you know, at the time I thought I agreed with them that it had been stolen. Now I just don't know.
Here's the trick. The studious avoidance of any discussion of it in the courts is suggesting to me that there is some malfeasance afoot.
No, I think I don't know. Oh, wait a minute.
The issue is interesting to me is my observation of this the functionality of what is occurring with regard to these indictments is that it looks like a psychological operation in order to swing the electorate to pro-America.
Right.
And it's like we'll let the usurper take the White House and let him do his worst and let him tell the lies and weaponize the Department of Justice just to show the American people what it is like if you let that team win. And the American people will choose the other direction. And it's loading the spring, is what it looks like to me.
Well, I would say it's a matter of all of the above, because we've never seen a conspiracy against the president. I wasn't happy with how far they took it with Clinton. I was against what they did to Clinton. I just don't understand why getting a blowjob from some chick is an effect on your presidency. I mean, that just was stupid. Wondering why all the people around him dropped dead. That was not worth. that was worth looking at. And I'm trying to get, I found out what I was trying to remember to talk about, so I'm distracted for a second. So give me 1 second.
While you recover, I will mention the name for that.
What?
Of the Clintons, which we call Arkansas.
Yeah. Okay. So so the point about Trump is they're trying to organize this so it comes in the middle of the campaign because they're afraid he's going to win. Well, he's going to win against Biden, so they're not. They're trying to figure out how to get rid of Biden and who they're going to put in. I think the California guy is obvious, and I think he might be able to beat Trump. I'm not positive, but you never know. Anyway, my only point was that, this is another example of abuse of the courts by lawfare, and it really frustrates me.
Well, it's like this failure of the trifunctional system, failure of rule of law. More evidence of it, and it's disturbing, isn't it? What to live in a defeated country that used to be a formerly sovereign place. That's how I regard it.
Globalists have done the job, right? I mean, we have to undo all that, and it's not hard, as I said before. That I've discussed this at length. That undoing the globalists is just repatriating the financial system. It's trivial. We're repatriating the manufacturing system. We repatriate the financial system, and it's all over for the globalists, because that's what they're using. They're using the financial system as a means of producing sovereignty against the sovereignty of the individual states. And they're trying to claim it's global, but it's actually to take over Europe. It's a quest to conquer European civilization. And while they claim it's globalism, it's not globalism. It's just anti-Westernism.
Yes.
Right.
And I would argue that they have taken over all the means of cultural production, and they have controlled the governments, and they're flooding the place with third world people everywhere, and that's the intention. They're trying to extinguish Western civilization, and good luck with that.
Well, it's not gonna.
But it looks to me like it spring loads the response, which is the Westerners need to organize.
It's going to produce the same thing that's happened 199 times. It's going to happen at a much broader scale, and it's not going to include just them. Right? So it's going to happen.
That's the rudest thing you've said to date.
Is it?
It's like, no, it's like, I would encapsulate it like this. Hang on, allow me to illustrate it with a card. I'm going to get a card out of my desk here, see, and I will get a marker too. I'm very excited to be able to use these.
I'm not sure I want you to provide greater clarity.
This is it. This is
I'm not sure I like this idea of greater clarity, Brad.
There we go. This is it. In a.
Oh, you're bad. Well, the thing is, I don't want it to be that. I want it to be, we eradicate this problem.
The issue is this. It's not there. They threw them out 109 times because they couldn't figure out how to stop them from being bad.
Yes.
And it's like,
which we have, and it's easy.
We figured out how to, because it comes down to specificity of the language, logic languages and grammars, which was lacking before the response at hand. And it's like, so it's not necessary to throw anybody out of a country, but to limit their behavior.
That's right.
All the third worlders that are
they're still going to call me not. They're still going to call us all Nazis.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it. What are we going to do? Call me names. Truth is truth. All right. So that 110 thing, that's going to become a symbol, I'm not sure you should have said that. That's going to start showing up as like, what is that, 88 or something like that?
Oh Oh my.
The 110th Military Division or something like that. I mean, it's gonna show up as something. Anyway, it's like, like I try to work with the Jewish groups in the past, and I say, well, look, it's just, this is what's gonna happen. But they don't know how to behave differently because they can't. And it's their culture.
No, it's deterministic function. I'm
Well, I
sorry.
mean, it's like, yeah, you say that, but if we put the law in place, it'll stop. I mean,
Well, they'll limit their behavior
mhm.
as much as they are. It's the same as the liquid in a vessel. It assumes the shape of the vessel limits.
Mhm.
It's not their fault. It's their nature.
Okay, so can I move on to the next topic?
Of course.
So I have two more topics now because I remembered what I wanted to talk about.
How about that?
So I watched an interview, a quick interview with Admiral Rob Bauer,
Okay.
the Royal Netherlands Navy. It's about
Okay.
our age, he's about our age. And he's I can't remember what his role is in NATO. He has a significant naval role in NATO. And he said that NATO does not have plans against China because China is not seen as a threat, but as a challenge. And Rob Bauer, Royal Netherlands Navy, as part of NATO. I'm like, well, that's sort of half true, which is really good because Europeans are good at saying half true things by saying true things that are only half true. NATO doesn't have plans. The USA has plans.
Yeah.
The USA doesn't share those plans with NATO because Europe is an unreliable ally in matters of the Pacific. Right? That's it. It's not complicated. But the more important part is when you say they have plans, what does that mean? It means that you know what a general staff does? It's military nerds play war games.
Right.
And they put them in folders. They write up books. They're like books, right? Some of them are long.
They plan for everything.
They plan for everything. That's really what they do, right? That's the purpose of your general staff, is to figure out. It's like when we had that's why Schwarzkopf was in. You have to always refer to something that's familiar to people, right? So
Right.
Schwarzkopf, why did he get put in charge? Because he wrote that plan. What's Schwarzkopf? Schwarzkopf's got 170 IQ, right? Right? He's way too smart to run for president, which is why he didn't, right? So he wrote that. So that's what you do. If you're a smart guy in the military and you work your way up and you got experience, or you figure out, oh, this hotspot could happen. And so you look at the world, and there are, I mean, I don't know if you've done this, but look, map of world military hotspots or conflict hotspots, right? And it's public knowledge what these hotspots are, right? They're all over the place.
Yeah.
And so what's your job in the military? Your job is to go through that. It's like being an academic.
That's right.
Right? You need to publish something that's meritorious. So what you do is you pick you get assigned, right? But you look at a region where there's some potential conflict coming up in the next 50, 100 years or 10 years for that matter. And you put together a plan of how you'd go do that. So you don't have to figure it out. The more a plan, it's like when I say, when you're going to develop the project, write the project plan for solving it. Not because you'll actually follow that project plan, but because you've thought it through. But once you've done 100 project plans, you come up with generalizations about how to think about doing projects. So the military comes up with generalizations about how to fight wars. So, it's like some of us have been pushing the light industry. Like I'm one of these people that pushes the light industry reform, light infantry reform.
Yes.
Right. So you push the light infantry reform. And some other people are saying, well, I want to have a bigger Navy, whatever. And some people saying the Navy's going to be all shot full of holes. The next conflict, no, there won't be any ships anymore. There'll be only submarines, right. And then there's so it's like, well, why are we building tanks when you can't freaking get them there? The Abrams tank is useful when we station them all in Germany against the Soviets, but you look at the Abrams tank and you put it in the desert, then all of a sudden you get a problem. Because it's got basically a jet engine. right? Which sand is not a good thing. It does not love, right? So what whereas a Leopard has a diesel engine, much better for that. What does that jet engine do? Well, of course, it gives you all that. It's incredibly powerful, right? It's amazing, but it sucks gasoline like an alcoholic goes through cheap liquor on a Friday night. Right? It's unbelievable. So what you do is you bring up these general rules like we need to be more mobile, we need to have different force structure, we need to pivot to Asia, and all this other crap, the stuff you hear about all the time. So that's what they do. So when there's a conflict, you just it's like pulling the file out of the drawer of like, how do we follow this procedure, right? I mean, that's what you do. So when they say there are plans, it doesn't mean we're going to go do it. It means we've thought about how to do it if we have to do it. So yeah, the USA has plans about how to take down China. I know about 3 of them, right? So that's it. There's 3 basic scenarios I know about. There's probably 20, right? Or more. Right. I have no idea what prior to, and why. It's because this stuff leaks out through RAIN and the different military think tanks. It leaks out through them, right? And so I just follow them all, right? That's what I do, right? I listen to all this. I listen to other nerds talk nerdy stuff, right? Nobody else has the patience that most common folk, and especially conservatives, haven't got the patience to listen to it. And then I try to convert it to. I don't convert it to ordinary people language, but I try to convert it to language our people can understand.
You should reduce the voltage a little bit.
What?
It's just a transformer. I'm transforming it to a more useful voltage.
Well, it's so politically, it's got layers of nonsense in it. What you're really trying to find out is what limits are being used here. To know what strategic limits are being used here. But there's because when you're talking to a think tank, they're generally saying, here's the military thing, here's a political strategy, here's how we might talk about it. So they're trying to advise politicians and the State Department about how to think about it, as well as the military is way farther ahead on this stuff than we tend to be aware of. And I know from the intel community is pretty fucking amazing. Really. I mean, in this level of thing. And I think we talked about this last week when I was trying to make it clear that, when you get access to that information, it's unbelievable what it's like, it's like the stuff about your spouse, right? They know that kind of level of stuff about other governments and other industries. Right. So what I was trying to say was that I was trying to talk about so that the general staff has its purpose. We don't have a plan per se, as in we are going to do something. We have a set of plans that are a set of options that we can rely on. So don't have to think about it and come up with them in the moment. But so what we're doing is we're doing certain things, like they're rapidly increasing nuclear weapons production again. You didn't know about that. See, I bet nobody knows it, but that's going on. That they're rapidly increasing nuclear weapons production after a long period of shutting them down. They're restoring and reproducing nuclear weapons to produce a lot more of them. They're repatriating all the technical industries necessary to produce the high-tech weapons, and they're going to try to repatriate the industries, whether here or to Europe, of all those medical supplies, right? And in the questionable stuff to repatriate is what they call rare earth minerals, which aren't rare. They're byproducts of it's just like when you take oil, you get all these petroleum products out of it at different weights, different boiling points. You get when you produce mineral extraction, some of these other things come out of it, and unfortunately it's fairly toxic, which is why it's done in China, because they don't mind about polluting every square inch of the country as much as we do. So we're repatriating on this. So you can see what's happening. And China is just as aware of this. So they're ramping up their nuclear arms production. They're ramping up their naval production. They're focusing it on Taiwan and the South China Sea, so they can militarize that whole thing the ways we've sort of militarized the we call the Gulf and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So we forced the Europeans out of that region, and even out of South America. The way that's the Chinese complaint, right? Is that why you guys did it? Why can't we do it? I'm like, because we didn't have this. We were trying to keep these militant Europeans out of creating more wars, and you're trying to create wars against the interest of your neighbors. And that's not what we it's not a neutral proposition for us. So, any event, the U.S. strategy, I wanted to say this we are an enormous island. That's our benefit,
Yes.
right? We're also north-south, which is a
Yes.
transportation barrier, whereas the world island, which is Eurasia and some Africa, is all
Yeah.
connected. So you need a land army there, you need a Navy air army from military from where we are. So we got this enormous island, and so there's a benefit in that we're isolated, but there's a problem, and that power projection really requires Navy and air power. It's very difficult to produce land power elsewhere because you have to transport all that there and maintain it. So we try not to. So so we use every possible incentive to prevent war, and we use delay at all possible, and then we use bribery of allies, right, to try to prevent this war, because we don't want to project power into these places if we don't have to. It never works out for us, right? So as I said, the USA tried to integrate China into the rules-based order, and in doing so, just like we bribed other cultures, we bribed China with our manufacturing capacity. And unfortunately, that they're using that manufacturing capacity the way we use our financial system as a weapon. And so we're repatriating that manufacturing incrementally back to the USA, which is why we're having the largest reindustrialization, which is why I'm not so worried about the industrial future of the USA as I was 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
So we'll also be able to be more autarkic, so we're less vulnerable in that. So what we've learned, though, and I want to say what Americans have learned, which is why we're getting this. We learned from people want to relegate it to just the Afghan experience, but it's not true. It's the whole experience of trying to build this international rules-based order. And that the Americans, like the colonial powers, like the Romans before them, like the Greeks before them, we've rediscovered that you can't domesticate other civilizations. Because in order to domesticate others, you have to be able to cooperate on equal footing. And if you can't cooperate on equal footing, it's in the interest of the less of all to operate on conflict footing. So as such, we're having this retrenchment, which Trump was driving, this retrenchment to cause the Europeans to take over their responsibility, which the Russians, of course, made happen. But because we realize we can't domesticate, we've learned we're not going to domesticate China. And right now, India is beginning to revert. So we're not going to be able to domesticate India either. That means we're not going to be able to domesticate Africa. That means that what's his name was right, and that the conflict of civilizations is going to return. Huntington, thank you. So that was one of the two topics I wanted to cover. Did that make sense? Did I get my points across with that one?
Yes. So it goes to this, and I'll point back to the discussion we had about the election coming, which is America first appears to be the order of events that will occur. It must occur, and that the stage is being set for this.
Yes.
And this Leninist sideshow that we call our current government is just loading the spring to make everybody understand what is at stake and what we must do. That's my opinion, at least.
I'm just trying to figure out how to reframe that in a way that I could discuss it. I would say that our country's more adaptable than any other in history. And and we adapt rather quickly. And we're not unwilling to have conflicts to cause adaptation. And in my understanding is that, like you keep bringing up, there's a class of men who are just about done.
Oh,
And
they're done.
they're dangerous men. They're not.
Done. They're so done. It's like, okay, just everybody cool your jets and don't talk about
Right.
that.
And I know a bunch of these guys, and I can't really interact with them too much because I'm very intellectual in my approach, right? They just want heads on pikes. So it's not really, I can't really, I mean, I understand them. I agree with them. They're right.
It's just a matter of timing,
right.
For effect,
And
right?
if for me to speak to them, I would have to go back to doing the things I promised the FBI I wouldn't do. So I don't get calls from people anymore saying, I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And this is partly a decision that Brandon and I made intentionally, because in 2019, we felt that people attacked us, our perception of the ride back in the car, that 6-hour drive or whatever, 12-hour drive, whatever it was that we had dodged a bullet.
Yes.
Right. Is that we actually were trying to come out and say rule of law is the answer. But if we had taken the step to defend ourselves aggressive, which the guys are willing to do, right? I mean, I was pretty dazed because of the heat and the dehydration, but if I'd have just said, present arms, it would have been all over. But the problem is we would have lost our position as rule of law and put ourselves back in the position of being of force. And I don't want to take that position because now I'm just as attackable by the government as everybody else.
But they know how to deal with that.
Right. So I can't make that step. So we're like, I'm like, we dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Because then, it's like, I came with that speech and it made you read the speech. I think it's awesome, right? It's a good thing. People were thrilled. We had a blast. It was a very bonding experience, but we knew what we were saying. And then when we look at the guys from the left, I was like, well, they're screwed. I don't disagree with that they're screwed. I disagree with their solution, but I'm not going to start a fight with these guys because then I get
you don't fight with that because that is a pawn.
That's how they bait you into hazard. So the way you do it is Gandhi, right? Which is how the approach I took, which was you don't let them bait you into hazard. The problem
That's right.
is you take the bait of force. You don't do that. If you're going to use force, you don't use threats. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can't threaten. You have to just show up in such overwhelming numbers that they have no choice.
Right.
Right. And so once, the minute I break, I'm not willing to give up all my life's work.
Right.
Make a bunch of, numbnuts, which, they're right. But they're not exactly, they're not intellectuals. I'm not really happy to burn my life's work and my ability to make change just so they can feel a moment of glory that somebody else stood up for them. So, in any event, so I took that sideways a bit, but I wanted to roll off what you were saying about the character of the left. It's a beautiful interview between Jordan Peterson and Godsod, who I'm a big fan of, and I've only spent time with him once, and we were at a dinner table, right? At a restaurant. And unfortunately, I didn't give him the attention he deserved because I was sitting next to McDonald, and I was trying to work with his frame of reference more. And then he's a more approachable person. I could have gotten more out of that if I'd have taken. And I really respect him because he's manly. Well,
Yes.
he's very manly. He's a hot shit, really. I mean, when he was younger, he was a really hot shit. So, I mean, I absolutely adore this guy. So, but he was talking with Peterson, and they were going through it. And so what happened is Peterson has and said we're citing studies that basically did all the. I need confirmation that what I say is true, right? So I like it when a third party that isn't knowing goes back and
Text the works.
enumerates. He didn't cite the studies, but I could go ask them, right? Enumerates the same stuff so that now I can say, well, look, it's not me, right? It's the primary research. One of the guys that did the research was a PhD candidate working for Peterson. So I wrote this, I captured this stuff as a way of saying that I want to emphasize how right I and we have been. Right, this is important because this is an example of how right we are. We're incredibly right. Our science is rock solid. Right. So what are the causes of left-wing authoritarianism? In other words, out of all the studies, what are they discovering?
Okay.
The presence of verbal intelligence, being female, having a feminine temperament, wishing to escape responsibility, wishing to be free of the constraints of pesky reality. Does this sound like what we say?
It's neuroticism.
No, it's
what we're totally what we said.
It's what we say, right?
Yeah.
These people demonstrate that they have dark triad personalities, particularly malignant narcissism. They're often psychopaths and parasites. They show facial asymmetry and low upper body strength. The male social justice warriors follow the ape tradition of what this is a technical term, which I thought was freaking beautiful. It's called sneaky fuckers. No, believe it or not, that's exactly what they talk about it. It means they engage in surreptitious mating. In other words, they're not able to get mating in competition with the dominants, but they will engage in surreptitious mating. And lastly, they've taken at least one course in something leftist, so something social justice, right? So up the first five, which are verbal intelligence, being female, having a feminine temperament, wishing to escape from responsibility, wishing to be free of pesky reality. What are those really? Those are reproductive inferiority and trying to try to escape it through verbal manipulation.
But by any means.
By any means possible. So they're actually, and how do we know that? Well, because they have physical deformities, so we can see our genetic evidence, genetic load, facial dark triad personalities, facial asymmetry, and being sneaky fuckers. Now we call that sneaky fuckers in males, but we don't call it as promiscuity in females. It's the same behavior.
We don't call them out for that.
Why? Because we like it, right? I mean,
just saying.
What about a world with? I was teasing one of my neighbors who's very frail. He's getting out of the car the other day, and I always try to help the older folks and if I'm down there and I can help them. So I got out of the car, she's got blue tint in her hair, and I'm like, did you do the blue hair thing so you could got just a blue tint in her hair? Yeah. So you could be sexy and more attractive. You trying to get some attention, and the whole fucking crew, they're women, right? They just break down. But I mean, the truth is that if it weren't for pierced tattooed girls with purple hair, or artsy chicks who let it flow out all over the place, that's a beautiful thing. It's like a discount. You just don't want to keep it. But anyway, so so I just wanted to point out that how correct we are
Right.
that when we say this. Now, I came to the same conclusions by linguistic analysis.
Okay.
Right. So how does personality research done? It's by word and context association. To give you an example, would you do in this, or would you categorize yourself in this situation as with this word? Right. It's all word association. But that's words. I mean, you can tell a lot about a person from the vocabulary, grammar, and stuff that you learn. So I start with linguistic. So because language is demonstrated behavior, right? But I prefer to see demonstrated behavior not in a test format, but in a King of the Hill game.
Right.
So I essentially do the same thing that personality test people do.
Right.
Right. Except I'm not trying to find what's good. I'm trying to find what causes people to lie, cheat, and steal. All right. So my work in the grammars is obvious at one point. It's unobvious when you get to lying. Because it turns out people are hella great liars.
Right.
But then you say, well, what's the motive behind the lie?
Right.
Well, if you know enough neuroscience, you can decide you can easily over time predict what is producing this desire. Well, it's verbal intelligence, it's being female, having a feminine temperament, wishing to escape from reality, wishing to escape from responsibility, wishing to free the limits of pesky reality. And well, what does that mean? Well, women have higher verbal intelligence. So an effeminate male who is a feminine temperament, wishing to escape reality and wishing to be free of responsibility, demonstrating dark triad traits with facially symmetry and low upper body strength, demonstrating that they're surreptitious maters, right? Those are basically they're basically aggressive women.
Right. And it's like, so this is where it's an interesting form of weaponization, right?
Yes.
Because it's like the feminine men are weaponized, and they end up being these I can't even say it. I can't say it. I'm gonna trouble.
Well, don't say.
There's trouble there, and it's like but it's like they emulate women behavior and ad extremum.
Mm-hmm. So how does this express in current culture? Well, turns out that the online trolls are dark triad personality.
Okay.
Right? The culture, they're the people who make me crazy. In other words,
I just knock them out. I don't even tolerate them.
Your morality is I'm done. I don't have anything to do with this. My morality is I have to kill you. Right? That, you know what I mean? That's my instinct.
I understand you.
I have to save other people from you. Not that I don't have to be affected by you. I can ignore you, but I have to save other people from you. I've been in a lot of therapy for most of my life to understand just how bad that is. And it doesn't matter what I do, I can't get rid of it. Because that's basically me.
No, but here's how I look at this. Okay. So I'm understanding you. And it's like this. It's like, it's just a figment of a troll that you shouldn't be jousting with, because it's just not, you can't eliminate it that way.
The way I do it is it's not worth my energy, because feeding the troll is basically the worst thing you can do. If on Facebook, I could just delete them. What I don't like about Twitter is I can't delete those people from my feed, from my thread, right? And I can block them so they can't see further, but I can't mute, and I can mute them so I don't hear more about it, but I can't remove them from poisoning the well.
That's right.
Whereas Facebook, I could delete those things, and I could delete the things I said in retaliation to them to try to get rid of them. But I would have a clean argument at the end with only real criticisms and oppositions. So that's what bothers me about Twitter, is that I can't make them go away. So because of that, I feel when I'm tired, especially, I get over it. Anyway, so online trolls tend to have dark triad personalities.
Hmm.
I'm really not interested. I really hate the use of this term narcissism because of how the women use it. Is like anything that's rational must be is narcissistic. Anything that isn't in service of their emotional impulses is narcissism. Anyway,
Hmm.
so but the problem is that this culture online, like I just said, it enables dark triad traits to be expressed. So that's what's ruining social media.
Hmm.
And the problem we have as a society, aside from the online, is that we have unregulated empathy tolerating this behavior. In other words, we're treating them with too much consideration when we should be punishing the living daylights out of them. And the problem is, until we have our work, right, the law, we don't. There's no way to distinguish between right, wrong, and evil, and evil and not. And lastly, here's the big problem that you and I are trying to solve, and the team are trying to solve, is that it's the willingness of the population. Tyranny is enabled by the willingness of the population to participate in the big lies. Unfortunately, people are really willing to participate in the big lies. And one thing Gad Saad said, is that and Peterson was trying to reinforce, is it does not take a lot of people to prevent that from happening, but you do have to have those people. And I was trying to make an example that from that if you can get 10% of the people to do something, you could convert the other 90. That's basically one of the social science lessons we've learned. And so we have to get about 10% of the population to understand our work, and then it'll happen. Getting 10% of the people to understand our work in terms that they can understand it, that's going to take a decade or two, but we'll get there. Now, I wanted to bring in the reversal on that. Am I doing okay, Brad? Am I overloading?
Yeah, I'm good. Right. I'm good. I'm bearing with it. The reversal. What's the reversal?
You're bearing with it?
Bearing with it, man. I'm just trying to. I'm following, and I'm like, okay, there's a reversal. I'm very excited about it. Okay, I'm writing in my
Western
book.
Experiment is an outlier and anomaly. It's easier to appreciate the West having experienced the results of left-wing authoritarian elsewhere, and then you come into the West with realizing how evil the opposition is. Right, so that it's kind of good that we get these dissidents, these authoritarian countries to come here. But what did I do something?
No, there's instability in the internet or something that's hanging up your.
Okay. So the reversal is that it's harder for us to convince people here of how evil the left is unless they've been in an environment. So we really need to do is look at all these people who have been under authoritarian regimes and come here and say, and the problem is that's going to be the people who have higher agency. Anyway, so the point I was trying to make here is that we're doing about the right thing. It confirms our work. And I try to explain that I look at things through this adversarial relationship between what does literature say and how do I discover this by demonstrated behavior and language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that sort of thing. And that's sort of the other thing that goes along with what I started with, which is that it's not clear that we're doing limits-based reasoning. In other words, we're finding the limits of first principles on one side and consequences on the other when we're doing it. And so it's it's really easy for people who hear us to treat our stuff as conservative nonsense, when actually it just turns out the conservatives were mostly right.
Well, it's like this. It's like, get this. I've heard it, which is, well, that's your opinion. It's like kind of not even close. It's like, but it's that objection comes from a place that has insufficiently refined logic, language, and grammar to see the difference.
Yes.
It looks the same to them. They can't tell the difference because the calipers don't do it.
So you tease me a lot because I'm very difficult to convince of something, right?
It's true.
Right. But then I have to tease you that you're right a lot.
That's true.
Right.
All of this is true. It's like eventually you'll figure it out.
Well,
but it will be proven beyond a shadow of
there,
a
okay,
doubt.
that's the answer. I have to prove something beyond a shadow of a doubt. So what's happened is people look at our work and they assume that it's just philosophy. I'm
Right.
like, it's not. It's if I say something and assertively, in other words, because you hear me prevaricate, I'm saying I'm not sure about this, right? I'll say that.
Right.
But if I say something, it's because of this. It's because of that. It's because of that because the science said so, and I run tests on demonstrated behavior that confirm that it said so. And I've tried, and I haven't agreed with it until I've so exhausted the opportunities, limits-based reasoning,
Right.
that there's no other alternative, right? But the problem with scholarly literature is the process of documenting what I do is relative. It's impossible, right?
I know.
What?
I know. I
So
like
it-
so it's like I get the well, it's like show me the proof or the work, or I'm like, that's never gonna happen. It's just too complex to even
Too
begin
complicated.
to start on it.
Like, but if you say, okay, it's being female, having a feminine temperament, wishing to escape responsibility, wishing to be free of pesky reality, having the verbal intelligence to manipulate people because you have a dark triad, malignant, narcissist, psychopathic, parasitic personality, and we can see it as expressed you can see it in the spatial structure of the Antifa, because they have facial asymmetry and low upper body strength, right? And that the females engage in promiscuity and the males in surreptitious mating. That, I mean, okay, well, it's just, that's the whole, how do you get out of that? Right? I mean, that's the science of the people who are effed up, right? It's like that one. And the problem is these people can survive in the academy. Like, especially the Brits. I don't know where these weird, wacky, communist, feminist Brits are surviving from. You can get a PhD in the United States by being a moron. It's amazing, right? But you can only get it in like the culture of the Lilliputians, which is the one that I've met somebody who did that before, and it was just bizarre to me, right? And I'm like, you got a room temperature IQ, and you've got a PhD in literature by the study of the language of the Lilliputians, right? And I'm like, okay, that's just not okay with me, right? And so
I just can't process that.
I just can't process
it. Just another indulgence, sir.
So and it's sort of like a PhD in education. Education doesn't require a PhD. It's fucking
EDD.
It's a secretarial course, right? It's about you either got the ability to do it or you don't. But a PhD in education, most of, I mean, all of them, they're nonsense. Only thing I can think of is PhD in education might reduce some error. Maybe. Anyway,
okay.
So those were the topics I wanted to talk about. I don't know if they were useful today, but
that was pretty good.
That was what I wanted to talk about. Was basically.
Why did you call it the reversal? What is the meaning of that term, reversal? Reversal.
It means that flip it around, look at it from the other side. All right, so it's a technique used in a bunch of places, from the Steelman argument to, who does it very well is I read 41 laws of power, or whatever it is, 42 laws of power.
Yes.
Green. And another Jewish guy who writes about immorality, which, as if it's heroic. That was so bizarre to me. But the theoretical structure of the book was fascinating. Anyway, what he did is he used examples of reversals, which is, okay, now let's flip it around. What's the negative, what's the opposite aspect of it? So I was just trying to show that you flip it around from our perspective to the opposite's perspective. The reversal is that these people coming from other civilizations have an easier time understanding what's the virtues of the West, because they don't take them for granted, because they've lived in a left-wing authoritarian.
Oh, right.
And so what I found really interesting about what you would find if you studied this is that the left talked about the authoritarian personality. They were projecting.
Yes.
Because we actually do the opposite. We're prohibiting authority by demanding responsibility. And they're trying to evade responsibility by advancing authority. Right, which is hysterical. I mean, so they're always lying. It's just so frustrating. Everything they say is a lie. Every goal.
Wait, so it's like it goes to this. I talk about it as the diode is in backwards. Okay.
As what?
There's a diode in backwards. Their perceptions are backwards.
Yes.
And therefore their intentions are always backwards. And therefore they always get the opposite of the result they intend.
Yes.
Which is like this. So they're obligated, we go back to our conversation a bit ago, which is they have to indict Mr. Trump because that's what will help Mr. Trump the most. That's what it appears to have occurred to me, but it's like, okay.
Well, they actually do achieve incremental progress towards what they want. The outcome, in other words, they achieve incremental social construction. So they do achieve what they want as social construction, but the result of the social construction is not what they.
Is the opposite of their desires.
Opposite of their desires. It actually produces the opposite because. And so this is one of my challenges this week. I was having a bit of stress about this. I haven't been healthy for a couple of days for some reason I don't understand, but maybe it's been a week. But hoping I'm over the hump now. But is that you just can't come say it's like it's just women. I mean, it's you don't want to. In the end result, that's the problem. What do you do with that being the problem? So wait a minute. You already said the answer. I was giving you that was giving you the opportunity to say it's like water and it fills the
we have to draw the lines of the limits of behavior that is acceptable and make it certain, and they understand that, they'll conform. That's how it is. That's right. The problem has been the limits were not properly drawn, and we were taken advantage of because we didn't understand what was occurring, because we didn't have the sufficiency of language, logics, and grammars to define clearly what was happening and why it was happening, because the science was not understood. And there was really no reason to understand the science until the damn thing broke.
Okay, now that's brilliant. Say that again.
That we did not have sufficient logics, languages, and grammars to understand the problem. And there was no reason to develop the logics, languages, and grammars and understanding necessary to solve the problem until the problem manifests itself as the broken dam.
That was exactly it. That's why we didn't solve it.
That's right. There's no reason to solve it. And that they sort of were solving it, like this book, Malleus Maleficarum, that I have not finished yet. Still reading it. And it's like, they talked about the same problem. And they specifically, this is 1450 or something like that. They're writing this, and it's like, they said, why do we talk about the witches and not the warlocks? And it's because there's so many more witches, and women are more susceptible to the evil spirits that we're talking about, which is that they are the ones that are baited into hazard because and magical thinking, because that's what they do. They do it more than the men do.
Is that, so this is a real, is this better? Okay. Darwin, the argument is we killed God. Darwin killed God. Right? That's not true, but that was the argument at the time.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Now, is that or at least he killed the church? I don't know. Was it killed I mean, the death of God was a thing, and of course Nietzsche
Right.
wrote about this, right? So this thing about women is at least on that scale, maybe more so.
It's like there is a rebellion against it. This knowledge, this certain knowledge that has been in our tradition for a long time. So it goes back to Adam and Eve, man. It's like, why did the snake talk to Eve?
You know, but I can't use that as a scientific argument.
I understand
I
you, but
can
it's
use
like,
that as surviving ancient wisdom. Right. I mean,
right, right. It's like, but it's like
like why
the
gee,
church
the Greeks
talks
and the
about,
Romans kept women in the house. You know why? They needed to, because they're all.
wait, the guys who didn't aren't around.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's a tradition because it is a persistence behavior.
Yes. So, you know, I'm a libertarian. I'm never going to stop feeling like and my intuition is libertarian, right? Right. Don't matter, even though I know it's wrong. It's my intuition.
Okay.
I have no problem. It's like my problem with I can't prove to you I talk to God anyway. I don't know. Right. It's the same level of thing. I don't have a problem with these dichotomies because there's no problem separating them. Right.
Right.
So, but I have this thing of I love women. I mean, I love women too. Women are awesome. Everyone should have one. Everyone should own one. Okay. I just said that to get your reaction.
I saw that one coming.
You saw that one coming?
Yeah, that was too easy to avoid.
All right. So, so the problem here is that I really love women. I want to make it so women can participate. So but the problem is there'll always be a problem because it's genetic. Now we talk about the Jewish and the Gypsy problem.
Right.
So if we change the laws, will the Jews still be a problem? In other words,
no.
That's my opinion, right? That's what I agree. I agree is that we can change the laws to prohibit this stuff, right? And we can make it a natural law. In other words, it's science, so it's not open to opinion. And we just document the sex differences in law and lying, and we put this out there. And then women will fit the glass, and we'll put more effort on the mean girls, which basically dark triads. We'll take the mean girls and we'll put them into therapy and say that if you have this problem, you need to be cured of it, because we have to recognize those women in a social form are as criminal as men are in material form. There's just no difference between the criminality of men and women. It's just how they commit their crimes. So,
right.
So whereas we used to just lock them up in sanitariums, right? Because we forget that prisons were full of men and sanitariums were full of women, but that was how we handled the problem in the past. You believe, what I'm asking you is, do you believe that if we reinforce the laws, the structured institutions, that's enough, that we can contain the witches? I can't figure out if you're being serious or you're messing with me. You got a couple of facial expressions. It's very hard to tell the difference.
I know my repertoire of two of them. So yeah, it's like this. It's like the witchery is magical thinking. Okay, and it's like they get to have the magical thinking. It's like the behavior that is baiting into hazard is the problem.
Yes,
and that can be, we can control that expression of the magical thinking. You can magical think all you want, to yourself.
Mhm.
Don't be out and about magicking around and causing problems.
Okay, so let's go with Christianity actually works. All right.
Right?
So it works for both sexes, but it particularly works in both sexes to produce a marriage. But it's more advantageous. It's more important for women.
Okay.
So could we demystify that cognitive behavioral therapy, as the Stoics tried to, as a discipline? In other words, could we teach women, men and women, mindfulness the way we used to teach fitness?
You could do it, and the problem is that they will find in there justificationary thinking to allow them to misbehave too.
Oh,
And that's the problem. The problem is that the story I hear, it goes like this. It's like the church girls are bad. This is the legend. Okay. Now I'm not saying it as a proof for my belief, but
no, this is just a
telling you
statement of
what has been
legend.
reported, what has been reported to me. Okay.
Mhm.
The church girls are bad, and they expect their future husband to forgive them their past misdeeds. So that gives them license to do whatever they need to do at the moment. It's like, there's a rumor. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just like telling you that I heard it. And I'm like, there's this is true, that in any system, someone will be able to find the justification for their misdeeds.
So it just means incremental suppression is endless. All right, so we're via negativa innovation is always necessary to suppress via positiva innovation. Right? Okay, that's all fine. It's fine as long as we've created the system for via negativa suppression. So we've accelerated that, so it's fine. All right, I have been I didn't realize how much I've taken up your time today. So I've gone way over schedule with you. I really apologize.
Oh my.
Okay.
It's all right. We had a good time.
We had fun. I had blast today. Given out my alpha. All right. So I'd like to stop recording, but I want to talk to you for a minute.
Very good.
You got to do your thing. Got to do the thing.
Wait, the thing. Okay, I'm gonna try.
The thing.
You guys, all you guys, hit like, subscribe, notifications, then leave the glorious comments to us.
Yes, and I want to remind all to tell Brett how thankful, appreciative you are that he's handsome, charming, brilliant, and a contribution to all of us. All right, so that's like this great test if people watch the whole video. Anyway.
That's the bonus prize.
All right, love you guys. It's been Saturday, August 5th, 2023. Let's talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.